Greetings, Mr. Rinkēvičs.
Hello.
Thank you very much for joining me today. It's a great pleasure and honor to talk to you and to thank you for all the help and support we are getting from your country, from your government. It really helps us in our fight for freedom, for our freedom and for your freedom as well. For our audience, I will just say that according to the recent research data from Kiel Institute for World Economy published a few days ago, Latvia is #1 among countries when it comes to the donations to Ukraine in proportion to their respective GDP, and that's quite a lot. So we are very grateful for what you are doing for us, for all the help. But we've got a lot from you already. But is there anything you are maybe planning to give us in a near future?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. And let me say that, as you rightly said, we believe that your fight against Russian aggression is also our fight, because we understand that there is larger issues at stake. This is the peace and security in Europe and also indeed in the whole world. Now, when it comes to the military assistance, yes, at some point we have been doing a lot, and I think that we are currently #1 when it comes to the percentages of GDP, which is 0.9, but when it comes to value, then it's 300 million euros of different kind of military equipment, air defense weapons, howitzers, and so on. Indeed, we are looking and we are in constant communication with our Ukrainian friends and partners, with Ministry of Defense, with Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, trying to understand what we can do more. But we also are pushing our friends and allies in NATO and in the European Union to do more. So there are some specific issues that we are currently considering, but I'm not at liberty to reveal what are those specifics, because I understand that the war is changing all the time. There are great needs for Ukrainian armed forces, and if we find any other opportunity to help with weapons or any other way, we will do that.
But nevertheless, you are going to give us more, yes?
Well, we are constantly providing what we can, both military and non-military, let's say, material for Ukrainian armed forces.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, thank you. Mr. Rinkēvičs, there are a lot of Ukrainians right now staying in Latvia. Do you know the exact figure? How many?
Well, numbers are constantly changing. What we have, the latest number that is more or less stable, is around 40,000 Ukrainians who have been registered or who have been asking for that or another assistance from both national or local governments. But, you know, we also see that there is a constant flow of Ukrainians crossing Latvian-Russian border, those who are trying to escape via Russia from occupied territories. We are also seeing that some of Ukrainians are leaving back to Ukraine. Some are using Latvia as a transit country, but actually the number that we can more or less quote as a stable is 40,000.
But do you know of the number of Ukrainians coming to Latvia, as you said, on the Russian-Polish border, or Latvian border?
Well, this has been a bit mystery, frankly, because we have seen, some hundreds of Ukrainian citizens crossing border of Latvia and Russia in summer and in September. Now, for some reason, this flow has stopped, and we have a suspicion that it has something to do with Russian internal border management and maybe also with the mobilization efforts, but we do not have exact reason why the flow has decreased. But I would say that most of those people use Latvia and Lithuania then as a transit going to reunite with their families, or sometimes simply to get back to Ukraine, making a very, very long journey.
So for such Ukrainians, Latvia can be like a transit point, yep?
Mostly of them cross the border and then they move on. Some stay, but you see, we do not require a mandatory registration of Ukrainians in Latvia. If they need any kind of assistance from the government, then of course they register, they get the temporary residence permit or visa. They can get also, if there are children, those children can begin their school year here. That's where we see that number. If there are people who simply spend a couple of days and they don't ask for any kind of advice or assistance, then basically we do not have understanding how many of those are, but this is a deliberate cabinet policy that we do not register everyone so that people do not have any bureaucratic, let's say, problems, especially if they are for a couple of days in the country.
I see. Minister, representatives of Latvian government as well as representatives of governments of other Baltic states and governments of some Eastern European countries, including Poland and some others, constantly say that they want to see Ukraine in NATO as soon as possible. I do understand that we in Ukraine have to do our homework in order to become a member of the Northern Atlantic Council, and frankly speaking, we are doing our homework. But still, do you personally have in mind any realistic terms or maybe timings when this can happen? I mean, when Ukraine can really become a member of the NATO, and when some of your EU partners will agree with what you say in Baltics and Poland?
Well, it is actually a very easy question for me and for my Baltic colleagues, because Latvia, along with the Baltic countries, other Baltic countries, has advocated Ukraine's and also Georgia's NATO membership since 2006-2008, since Bucharest summit. And we were also in favor of granting a membership action plan to Ukraine since, again, 2008. Unfortunately, as we know, not everyone in the alliance shared at that point this feeling. And also, as you rightly said, while there are countries like Latvia, like Poland, like Lithuania, Estonia, some other countries, saying that we really need to see a kind of action plan, kind of roadmap for Ukraine to become member of NATO, there are still different opinions around the table of the alliance. So I will not make any prediction on the timing, because frankly, it would not be very realistic at this point. What I'm looking for is to see our next discussion at the level of the foreign ministers of NATO countries at the end of November. But I also believe if we cannot set up realistic deadline or realistic terms, then at least we need to discuss what NATO can do to enhance Ukraine's NATO membership. Because let's not forget that in Bucharest in 2008, we as the alliance explicitly said that one day Ukraine and Georgia will become NATO members. And as you rightly said, we would like to see this day coming sooner than later. So we will be working with our partners and allies within the alliance to make much clearer kind of policy in this regard. But you know, I'm for quite a long time in this office. I've spent already 11 years, and I know that making any unrealistic deadlines and predictions actually harm everyone. Ukraine, us, and the alliance in general. So let's concentrate on working so that, like with the European Union, just 5-6 months ago, everyone was saying Ukraine as EU candidate. No, it's not going to happen. And look what happened. After very, very, I would say, active work by the Ukrainian government, by friends in the European Union, there is a candidate status for Ukraine. Now we have to deliberate on the next steps.
Yes, Okay, we'll see. And I hope that we'll become members of the NATO bloc as soon as possible, as you said. Okay, on Thursday you wrote on your Twitter account, and this is quote, "Nobody wants the world war, that is why we must stop Russia now." Minister, but what if crazy Putin decides to push the nuclear button?
Well, that's exactly why I believe that we need to step up our assistance and help to Ukraine. We have been providing a lot, and by we, at this point, I'm not speaking only about Latvia, I'm speaking about what is sometimes referred as the West. But I think that we also see where there are some shortfalls. Now we clearly see, after those deadly attacks on Ukrainian cities on Monday, those missile attacks where many people were killed, that more air defense equipment needs to be brought to Ukraine. And by the way, if there is a more air defense equipment that is effective, then also the possibility of any kind of scenario where some weapons of mass destruction are used diminishes. Second, we need to provide Ukraine with more tanks, with more heavy equipment. Everything you ask, you must get. That's the bottom line. What if weapons of mass destructions are used? I think that there is going to be a psychological breakup of minds of everyone. Like on 21st of February. I still believe that we made a lot of mistakes before Russia attacked Ukraine on 21st of February. I'm not even talking about the history of 8 years when in 2014, after occupation of Crimea, everyone somehow thought, okay, more or less, let's put sanctions and let's try to get back to business as usual with Russia. Now, I think that would be the second psychological guess, and we have talked with our partners and allies in NATO that we need to be prepared not only to issue the kind of statement how concerned we are, but actually also how we are going to respond. I know that this discussion is ongoing. I know that also we are talking with Ukrainian government. I know that there are different scenarios on the table, but I think that after 21st of February, we can expect all kinds of nasty things from the Kremlin and Putin and Russia, and that's why we need to be prepared. Whether those are going to be military actions or other type of actions, I think that this is where, at this point, there is a deliberate decision not to speculate in the public.
Yeah. Minister, what is Putin really afraid of?
I think that he is afraid of his own security apparatus and generals. Because if he fails, and you guys are doing really great, even if that costs a lot of human suffering, a lot of human lives, if there is a feeling that this war was started recklessly, that, let's say, more Ukrainian territories will be liberated by Ukrainian armed forces, those territories that are currently under the Russian occupation, I think that his own generals, his own security services chiefs will actually think how to replace him. I'm not so optimistic to speak about any popular uprising. I don't think that this is possible at this point. Propaganda is working really well. Those who were against Putin, those have left, many of those have left country or they are in prisons. But his own closer circle would be probably the biggest risk for him personally.
I see. A few days ago, Minister, you called Russian war in Ukraine a war of nerves. What did you mean exactly?
No, actually, I called the whole situation that we have now in this very, very tense situation. On one hand, there is Russian war in Ukraine. On the other hand, there is a great war for hearts and minds of the Western public. And here, one part of this definition, war of nerves, is exactly what you asked a couple of minutes earlier. What we can do and how we are going to respond to the threats by Putin and his government to use tactical nuclear weapons. Because, look, also in Latvia, there are many people asking the question, is this going to become nuclear war? Just before talking with you, I was talking with Latvian TV show a host where she asked me exactly the question, how prepared we are for nuclear war in Ukraine, use of tactical nuclear weapons, what shall we do, how we are going to respond, what about our crisis management system, and so on. And those questions are being asked in many countries, not only in Ukraine, but also in Europe and globally. So I think that this is, to some extent, blackmail. Let's not forget that there has been also a peace proposal by Mr. Elon Musk recently, as we remember, that I believe is completely unacceptable, but still you see that there is a kind of great battle for hearts and minds, and to some extent, who is going to blink first? And I think that at this point, losing, and I believe Russia is currently losing war against Ukraine on the ground. They are still trying to influence us so that we are pushing Ukraine for some kind of unacceptable peace deal. And that is where I believe is a red line. We should not do anything that pushes Ukraine into a corner, but we actually need to help Ukraine so that Russia is weakened so much that it is not able anymore to dictate any kind of terms and conditions to the world or to Ukraine. So this is the war of nerves to some extent.
Yeah, I see. Mr. Rinkēvičs, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken in March visited Baltic states, and while being in Riga, he said he called Baltics a democratic wall that now stands against the tide of democracy. It was in March. Did Putin already broke his teeth against this wall?
Oh, yes. That visit was at the beginning of March. That visit was about 2 weeks after Russia started its full-scale war against Ukrainian people. And I think that at that point, there were still some doubts if Ukraine is able to withstand. There was still a bit uneasiness if the Russian military, so disorganized and so weak as it actually proved to be weeks and months later. But I think that indeed there are at least three elements why we can say that Russia has broken its teeth. First of all, yes, sometimes we have a lot of discussions, but the unity of NATO and the EU is still there. And I think it is important. Yes, we have discussed some of the sanctions elements and we are not able to agree on some of those elements, but in a broader sense, that is there. Second, we continue providing weapons and military equipment to Ukraine. Again, could be more, must be more, but still this flow is there. And the third, I think that we have been still able to mobilize, and just a couple of days ago, UN General Assembly voted again with a very, very strong majority condemning Russia on this illegal occupation and annexation of Ukrainian territories. So those are kind of elements that show that while there are some countries supporting Russia, the majority of the international community is still very strongly feeling that breaking UN Charter and actually also breaking international law is not acceptable. And finally, Russia called this operation, this war, a special military operation. During special military operation, you don't do mobilization. That shows that actually things are much worse than expected, but let's also not become too complacent, because we should understand that Russia still is quite powerful, and this game is still not over, that we still need to help you, that unfortunately the winter is coming. There is going to be another test of resilience of the European societies with the prices, with the gas and electricity supplies. But to some extent, I'm cautiously optimistic that we will be able to withstand also the winter, and then most probably the next spring is going to be a bit different for Russia and not in the positive way for them.
Minister, my last question to you for today is as follows. Latvia, together with Lithuania, Estonia and Poland, stopped giving Russian citizens Schengen tourists visas. And you even issued a warning to Russians in your Twitter account. I will quote it in Russian, because you wrote it in Russian. Россияне, не пытайтесь пересечь границу, вас здесь не ждут. Прекращайте войну против Украины и убирайтесь из этой прекрасной страны. Do you think they, I mean Russians, understand this?
Well, we did stop issuing tourist visas already on 25th of February. What we did together with our Baltic friends, Poland and now Finland also, and as far as I remember now the Czech Republic also has made a similar decision, we have also restricted entry of Russians holding any visa issued by any EU country that is so-called short-term visa. Basically it's tourism, also work and leisure purpose, because there is no such thing as tourist visa. There is a short-term Schengen visa that basically is used for tourism. We have seen actually that around 25% border crossings have been reduced. We have seen that, yes, there are some exceptions that we applied regionally. This is a coordinated decision. You know, for bus drivers, for lorry drivers, some categories. But we see that actually number of Russians has decreased, but some still try to come through different ports of entry using other countries. So to answer your question, not everyone has got the message.
Unfortunately. So, Mr. Rinkēvičs, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me today, and thank you for the frank answers to my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.